Anthony Richardson has been benched. Apparently, not being able to complete 50% of your passes is a bad thing. But what does that mean for Anthony Richardson's future? And what does Joe Flacco's season mean for the other pieces in the Colts offense? That is our top story tonight. We've also got more off-field trouble for Jameson Williams. Perhaps a third suspension is coming already. The fallout from the Diontae Johnson trade, both from the Baltimore perspective as well as the Carolina perspective. Plus, we got the return of TJ Hawkinson. All the injuries and trends you need to know before setting your Week 9 lineups. We got you covered tonight on Breaking Fantasy Football. Welcome into Breaking Fantasy Football, part of the Yards per Fantasy Podcast Network and YouTube channel. I am Alex Johnson. Like I said at the top, our top story tonight is the benching of Anthony Richardson. The unfortunate, the heart-breaking benching of Anthony Richardson. I know, man, I was a big Anthony Richardson drafter this year, man. Big Anthony Richardson drafter. Just did not go well at all. But I still believe. But let's get into that story a little bit more. According to Stephen Holder, who is a Colts beat reporter on Twitter, he said that according to a Colts team source, he was told that, quote, "We are not quitting on Anthony. That will be the story, but that is not the case." That makes me feel a little bit better. They just want Anthony Richardson to take a step back, take a break from the pressures of the job, and try to grow during his time. And then head coach Shane Steichen clarified the following day, saying that Joe Flacco is going to be the quarterback moving forward. This is not a temporary move. Joe Flacco is the starting quarterback for the Colts rest of season. At least that's the plan. We know how these things kind of shake out. Eventually, the Colts might fall out of playoff contention or Flacco gets hurt. At some point, I do expect we're going to see Anthony Richardson back in the starting lineup for the Colts this season. Now, Holder also reported that Anthony Richardson was pretty devastated by the news, and you would expect him to be. That's not a surprise. But I mean, he didn't help himself by tapping out of the game because he was tired. That's not a good look. Not a good look. I don't think the coaches like that. I don't think the ownership like that. I don't think the fans like that. And you know what? I guarantee you, at least half of his teammates in that locker room were kind of giving him the little side eye, tapping out of the game because you're tired. As the quarterback in a big situation, a young guy, just not a good situation. So I think Shane Steichen was probably put kind of in a tough spot. I'm sure ownership is over here like, what are you doing? What's going on? And, over here, he wants to develop Anthony Richardson, and then you get over here, the other players on the team, they're like, clearly Joe Flacco gives us the best chance to win. What are we doing? Why are we even killing ourselves fighting for this team when you are not putting our best quarterback on the field, giving us our best chance to win? So I understand it from both sides of it. I would have liked to have given, I think he's going 10 career starts. I would have liked to see Anthony Richardson just play it out. What are the Colts really gaining from this other than Shane Steichen trying to save his ass, save his job from getting fired and from the locker room turning on him? The Colts organization perspective, you want Anthony Richardson to just be out there. Joe Flacco's not your future. Joe Flacco's not taking you anywhere this year. He might take you to a wild card spot at absolute best. And then what happens? What do you get out of that? You get a one and done in the playoffs? What do you get out of that? Why don't we just play out Anthony Richardson, see what happens? By the end of the year, he'd end up with 20 career starts or so? That's a good evaluation point. All right, we got a guy with 20 career starts. He's either making progress or he's not. And now we can make a decision in the offseason. Hey, he's not making progress. let's move on. Or, hey, you know what? We really liked what we saw over the last month from Anthony Richardson. Let's stick with him. You got to find that direction. Joe Flacco's not the direction. Unless you have decided at this point that Anthony Richardson's not the guy, which based on his inexperience in college and so far in the NFL, with his raw talent, I don't think it's time to make that call. I don't think it's time to make that call. Do you remember Josh Allen coming out of Wyoming? He was pretty bad those first 2 years. His completion percentage was hovering 50%. Now, he wasn't quite Anthony Richardson bad, but he was pretty bad. He couldn't complete passes for his life. And now look at him. Look at Jared Goff. He got run out of LA. He was the bust of all busts. Now he's an MVP candidate. You got to give some of these guys some longer time. Give them a longer leash. Let them develop, especially a guy coming out of college who just did not have that experience. And he has special traits. His ability to evade sacks is incredible. His rushing ability, him in the red zone is almost like Cam Newton. His arm talent is incredible. He just needs to work on some of the fundamentals of playing quarterback and needs to get his accuracy, his completion percentage up in those short and intermediate areas of the field, which is a big deal. I get that. But I would have liked to have just seen more time from Anthony Richardson. But I mean, yeah, it was ugly. Don't get me wrong, it was ugly. He completed just 35% of his passes over the last 2 weeks. Bad. Now, Joe Flacco stepping in, he saves the day. He does save the day for Josh Downs and Michael Pittman. And you know what? I think even Jonathan Taylor is a winner in this move to Joe Flacco. Michael Pittman, his only 100-yard game this year, and both of his touchdowns came from Joe Flacco. Josh Downs combined for 30 targets, 217 yards, and 2 touchdowns in those 3 games with Joe Flacco. Even Alec Pierce had a 134-yard game and one of Flacco's starts. And look at Adonai Mitchell. Adonai Mitchell's best performance of the season so far, that came in week 5 with Joe Flacco. Now, the Colts, kind of like the Browns last year, their coaching staff, they trust Joe Flacco to throw the ball at a high volume. He attempted 44 and 38 passes in his 2 starts. So they're letting him sling it. And he completed 67% of those. Anthony Richardson could never. Oh, heartbreak. But that volume that they're giving Flacco, paired with actual competent quarterback play, that is going to be money for the other pieces of that Colts offense. We can now start Josh Downs with confidence. If Michael Pittman can shake this back injury, we can start him with confidence. You might even be able to stash Alec Pierce and Adonai Mitchell in deeper leagues. And I did mention Jonathan Taylor is a winner. Everybody wants to talk about the receivers. Jonathan Taylor is a winner. An improved offense means more efficiency or better efficiency, extended drives, more plays, more trips to the red zone. It's all good for Jonathan Taylor. And Joe Flacco is zero threat to take any goal line carries away down there in the red zone from Jonathan Taylor like Anthony Richardson would either. So there's going to be more opportunities for everyone in the Colts offense to score more fantasy points. So from that perspective, we love it. The DVO is saying he traded Josh Downs for Diontae Johnson right before the news came out. That one hurts. That one hurts. That was not a bad deal at all at that time because, I mean, you couldn't really trust Josh Downs. I know he was getting there a couple times with Anthony Richardson, but a week-to-week basis, you don't feel that good rolling Josh Downs out into your lineup with Anthony Richardson at quarterback. Now, we could see a top 15 rest of season performance from Josh Downs. And we're going to get to, why don't we just move right into our next story, which is Diontae Johnson to Baltimore. And we'll kind of give you my thoughts on that. So the Ravens gave up a 5th-round pick for Diontae Johnson and a 6th. Now, by the way, how wild is the trade deadline this year? This is fantastic. So every week we're getting wide receivers traded. Fantastic. Who's next? We get the trade deadline on Tuesday. I'm going to guess we're going to get a couple more trades. Let me know in the comments who you think is going to get traded next. Maybe, is it going to be Adam Thielen? Who else is going? Who else is on the move? Where would you like to see them go? Anyway, so this is basically for the Ravens. They're getting him for free. They're getting him for free. They're going to move back by 10, 15 spots. They're going to go from a late 5th-round pick to an early 6th-round pick. Now, of course, you're going to have a couple of comp picks in there as well, so it might be a 10 to 15 pick drop. Not a big deal, especially at that point in the draft. And on top of that, the Panthers are going to pay most of Diontae Johnson's remaining 2024 salary. They're getting him for free. They have nothing invested in Diontae Johnson. This is basically like a luxury pick. This is not a guy. This is my concern about this. This is not a situation where the Ravens, they invested all this capital and money into Diontae Johnson, and now they're going to bring him into this offense and feature him and force feed him targets. That's not going to happen. This is like an upgrade. Oh, this is a chance for them to upgrade over Nelson Aguilar, over Rashad Bateman as the ancillary pieces of the passing game. He's stepping into an offense that is already featuring and playing really well Zay Flowers and Derrick Henry. So I do think this is a slight dip down, not a major dip down, but a slight dip down for Zay Flowers. Of course, he's going to have to compete with another guy who has a history of being a target commander. Now, we might see Zay Flowers maybe get more opportunities down the field rather than those high percentage routes and catches underneath. Those might start going to Diontae Johnson, which could really hurt. That could hurt Zay Flowers. It really could. I think it's a little bit of an upgrade for Lamar Jackson, but he was already the QB1 anyway, so can't go up much more. It's definitely a down for Diontae. Definitely a down for Diontae. He goes from being, I know that there's a big quarterback upgrade and a big offense upgrade, but he goes from being the guy to definitely not the guy, because now he's in the pecking order for touches. He's behind Derrick Henry. He's behind Zay Flowers. He's probably behind Mark Andrews. He might even be, at least in the short term, might even be behind Rashad Bateman. Short term. Now, I think Bateman's definitely a big loser here. And I think Isaiah Likely is a big loser here because he was essentially operating as the team's wide receiver 3. And now that role is gone. That role is gone. So I do want to talk about the Panthers side of this a little bit later in the show. I have a couple of nuggets, a couple of notes, a couple of thoughts I want to say for later in the show on the Panthers side of this trade. But I want to move on to our next top story, and that is TJ Hawkinson is back. He's going to make his season debut, finally. He obviously coming off that torn ACL at the end of the year last year. I think he had surgery in January, maybe even beginning of February. So it's been a long haul. It's going to be great to have him back. And they activated they opened his practice window 3 weeks ago. I think they used the entire 21-day window to allow him to get fully up to speed in practice, in the offense with Sam Darnold. Really get the trust in that knee going so that when he is ready to go back on the field, he's going to probably see at least close to a full complement of snaps. I think we're going to get full TJ Hawkinson. Now, is he going to be all the way there as far as explosiveness and agility that we've seen from him in the past? That may take a little bit to come all the way back. But as far as role, as far as routes and snaps, I think we're going to get pretty close to our typical TJ Hawkinson role here. And Sam Darnold is playing great. The offense is playing great. TJ Hawkinson coming into this offense, adding to this offense that is already clicking. That's kind of nice. That's kind of exciting. It's kind of exciting. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. Now, what is not going to be fun is anybody who is rostering Jordan Addison, because Jordan Addison was already as it was. You're already, he's touchdown dependent already. Even, I mean, he can barely out target Jalen Naylor. He's, I don't know about Jordan Addison. I don't know about the long-term outlook of Jordan Addison. But the short-term outlook for sure is not good for Jordan Addison. I mean, already this year, he has had just one game above a 17% target share. One game. That's not good. Not good. He had a couple of good weeks since he got there in touchdowns. A touchdown luck ran out like that. And now we have Jordan Addison. We don't know what to do with him. Drop him. I think you can drop him. He's droppable. He really is. He's droppable. Now, with TJ Hawkinson back, someone who is not back is Jonathan Brooks. And this is just continues to be a victory lap, unfortunately. An unfortunate victory lap. But I told you in the summer, do not draft Jonathan Brooks. Do not do it. Do not do it. Do not do it. This is why. It's worse than I thought. It's worse than I thought. Our last top story tonight before we move on to the injury report is Jameson Williams is in trouble off the field again. Again. He could end up facing felony weapons charges. He had a gun in his brother's car during a traffic stop recently, and he did not have a permit to carry a concealed weapon. Now, it might not be a felony charge. It could end up being a misdemeanor, which wouldn't be so bad. But a felony could be really, really bad news for Jameson Williams. His career is just... He had a couple good weeks, couldn't sustain. Boom, right back down. Suspension. Now we got this issue. Now, interesting part of this is the prosecutors in this case, they're also investigating the police officers from that traffic stop. They're investigating their failure to actually arrest Jameson Williams. They let him go. Where it's being said that they should have arrested Jameson Williams for these. This is a serious charge. Gun charges are no joke. So they could face charges for not charging Jameson Williams. So that's interesting. Very interesting twist in this story here. But we already know that Williams is currently serving a 2-game suspension for violating the NFL's PED policy. He's going to be eligible to return next week after week 9. He'll be back. But we'll see where this situation goes. He already had that suspension last year for gambling. Probably is going to end up in 2025 being suspended again for whatever comes out of this case. So just bad situation all the way around for Jameson Williams. Just not good. Just tells you something about the mentals. He's just not all the way there. Dedicated, focused. Something's off. And it's a real big concern. Let's move on to the injury report. Let's go to the injury report. And I've come up with a brand new way to present the injury report because I've been trying to cut these shows down to be a little bit more concise, a little bit more focused. In these injury reports, there's so many injuries this year. The injury report has been taking so much time. It's been taking 20, 25 minutes just to go through the injuries. So we are going to cut it down, concise it down a little bit more. I'm going to put the graphic on the screen so we can look at it together. And I'm not going to talk about every single injury. That's what we were doing in the past. I was talking about every single injury, every single player. Now you can just look at the screen. I'm going to pick out the ones that I want to talk about, and then we'll move on to the next segment of the show. So if you turn your attention to the clear, in the clear column, these are the guys who are going to play. Guys like Lamar Jackson, he popped up with an injury this week. back injury, knee injury, missed a couple days of practice. John Harbaugh didn't seem to think it was too serious. And apparently it's not. So he was back at practice on Friday. He is clear. He's going to play. Jerome Ford is back. Remember, he was the guy in that backfield, the Browns backfield, for the first several weeks of the season. And as he goes out, Nick Chubb comes back. So it's going to be interesting to see how that backfield shakes out with Jerome Ford back. And as they've been trying to ramp up Nick Chubb. Jared Goff also came up with an ankle injury this week. It said, I guess he rolled his ankle during the game last week, missed a couple days of practice, came back at the end of the week. He is fine. He's good to go. We already talked about TJ Hawkinson returning. Derek Carr is back. He's missed the last several weeks. No more Spencer Rattler. Thank goodness. No more Spencer Rattler. Alvin Kamara is good to go as well. He's got a hand and rib injury. Tyrone Tracy cleared concussion protocol. He's going to play. Calvin Ridley is going to play. He banged up his shoulder last week. Had a big breakout game in this first game without DeAndre Hopkins. He is clear. He is going to play. Jaden Daniels continues to battle the ribs injury, but he is good to go. And Drake May cleared concussion protocol as well. He is going to play against the Titans. Other guys expected to play this week are Xavier Legette with a toe injury, Tank Bigsby ankle, Zamir White with a quad. Jordan Love is expected to play with that groin injury. It's not going to be Malik Willis this week. And then DJ Chark was activated off IR with that groin injury. He is going to play this week. Now, up in the air, these are the guys who we might get those classic late night Adam Schefter tweets that tell us one way or another that either these guys are expected to play or they're not. And that includes Amari Cooper with a wrist injury, Josh Jacobs ankle, Travis Etienne hamstring, Brian Thomas is very questionable with a chest injury. It was reported earlier in the week that he might miss 2 to 4 weeks, and then the Jaguars say, no, it's just kind of a contusion. He's day to day, so we'll see what happens with Brian Thomas. Gabe Davis is also dealing with a shoulder injury, so that wide receiver core in Jacksonville is very banged up. Obviously, they were now going to be without Christian Kirk, out for the season with a broken collarbone as well. Puka Nacua popped back up with another knee injury. I don't know if it was a re-aggravation of the other knee injury that he missed several weeks with, plus time in the preseason with. But Puka Nacua back on the injury report with a knee, missed a couple days of practice. He is up in the air for week 9. Jordan Whittington missed last week, shoulder injury. We'll see if he'll be back. Cedric Wilson, hip injury. Bucky Irving was limited all week with a toe injury. Sterling Shepard has a hamstring. Tony Pollard, a foot. Maybe you got to look towards Julius Chestnut as a deep sleeper this week off the waiver wire. Tyler Boyd has a shoulder injury, and Brian Robinson Jr. has a hamstring. Now, Brian Robinson has been playing through injuries for several weeks now. And the interesting part of this one is that today they actually called up a running back from the practice squad, which generally indicates that these guys are probably not going to play. All right, they're probably not going to play. So that's bad news, not looking great. I would lean towards probably not playing for Brian Robinson just based on that. Doubtful this week are Adam Thielen with a hamstring, Jonathan Brooks, knee injury, T. Higgins is probably not going to play again with a quad, Zach Moss unlikely with the neck, Jamal Williams with a groin, and Will Levis is not going to start this week. He's got a shoulder. And then officially out is Kendre Miller. He was actually placed on IR with a hamstring injury. I made a joke last night on one of the personalized podcasts that we did with Sam. I said, we were talking about Marshawn Lloyd. I said, Marshawn Lloyd is this year's Kendre Miller. And he said, no, actually, Kendre Miller is still this year's Kendre Miller, and it couldn't be more true. Kendre Miller is a disaster. He cannot stay healthy. He's going to miss at least the next 4 games. That's very unfortunate. Dallas Goedert, hamstring injury is out. DK Metcalf is going to miss another week with a knee injury. They got a bye week next week, so he's just going to get healthy through the bye. We'll see DK Metcalf back in week 11. I'm pretty sure of that. Noah Fant is also going to be out of that offense. Mike Evans, we know he's going to be out until at least week 12. Tajay Spears is out again. Juju Smith-Schuster is out again. And then Ezekiel Elliott came up today with not making the trip with the team to Atlanta. And that is not an injury. That has been reported as a disciplinary situation. So I don't know if Ezekiel Elliott is not happy with his role and now he's, throwing a temper tantrum. I don't know. Is he the next Romeo? Is he the Romeo Dobbs of running backs? I don't know. But Ezekiel Elliott not going to play. Not that he was doing anything for our fantasy teams anyway. But that is your injury report. We got it done in about 5 minutes, not 25. This is a big win. Big, big, big win. So now we can move on to the ones to watch. I do see questions in the chat. We will get to the questions at the end of the show. We only got a couple more segments to go. Ones to watch. So we talked about the Diontae Johnson trade at the beginning of the show, the top stories. We talked about the Ravens side of it, but I want to get a little bit deeper into the Panthers side of it because obviously without their top wide receiver as well as Adam Thielen still being out and reportedly potentially being on the trade block, that leaves some interesting players. We got to go a little bit deeper to find who is going to be catching passes in that offense. And the two guys who really stand out are obviously Xavier Legette. He's given you some decent weeks this year. He's got 3 touchdowns in the last 5 games. He also has 3 games with at least 7 targets. And now he's got a good matchup this week going against the Saints, who have allowed the 7th most fantasy points to wide receivers. And they're going to be without Marshawn Lattimore, who, by the way, could also be on the trade block. Now, going a little bit deeper, it seems to be every fantasy analyst's favorite sleeper of the week, which means he's probably going to be this week's Dontavian Wicks and do nothing. But it is Jalen Coker. He is an undrafted rookie free agent out of Holy Cross. But he's got some juice. He's 6'1", 208 pounds. If you look at playerprofiler.com, he's got 98th percentile burst. That means he's explosive. He's an explosive player. And if you go back to week 8, he had 4 catches for 78 yards and a touchdown. So we saw some signs of life. This guy can produce with Bryce Young, by the way, with Bryce Young. If you can produce with Bryce Young, you probably have some talent. And you know what? Even on top of that, if you can make a roster as an undrafted free agent out of Holy Cross and then also get on the field and have a role, you have talent. So this guy is talented. Keep Jalen Coker on your radar. You might even be able to start him this week in some deeper leagues. He's only rostered in like 6% of Yahoo leagues right now. He runs about 80% of his routes from the slot. And I'm sorry, he ran about 80% of the routes last week. 70% of his routes come from the slot. This is a heavy slot receiver. And if you look at the matchup against the Saints have allowed the 4th most fantasy points per game to slot wide receivers. So Jalen Coker is interesting. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that in my next show with Sam in about an hour, 9 o'clock Eastern time. We are going to dive even deeper into the sleepers that you can pick up off your waiver wire and play in week 9. So keep an eye out for that show, 9 o'clock, right here on the Yards Per Fantasy YouTube channel. Let's move on to the trends to know. I got some trends to know. We're not going to dive too deep into them. I just got 6. We're just going to kind of just go through a list, something to just keep in the back of your mind as you're making lineup decisions, as you're making roster decisions over the next few weeks. So the first thing is we talked about last week with Chris Godwin going out, Mike Evans going out. What is happening with the wide receivers in the Tampa Bay offense? Who is going to be the one to step up? Is it going to be Jalen McMillan? Is it going to be Sterling Shepard? Is it going to be Trey Palmer? Well, apparently after 1 week at least, the answer was no. None of the above. It was actually Cade Otton, which was very predictable, right? But then something I did note, and maybe didn't dive deep enough into it on the show last week when we discussed it, was the running back usage. Now, if we do look at the wide receivers, Jalen McMillan had a 14% target share last week. That's nothing. Brian Miller had a 10% target share. Sterling Shepard, same thing. Raheem Jarrett had a 6% share. And Trey Palmer is all the way down at 4%. But the running backs combined for 13 targets between Bucky Irving, who had 7, and Rachaad White, who had 6. So the running backs are going to be a big, big part of this Tampa Bay passing game, as well as the running game, making up for the loss of those 2 wide receivers. And now they could also be without Sterling Shepard this week as well. We talked about that in the injury report. He was on there. He's kind of up in the air with a hamstring injury. So the running backs, we want Bucky Irving, we want Rachaad White. These are the guys who are going to benefit the most, as well as Cade Otton in that offense. The next trend you need to know is with Jordan Mason departing with injury, he re-injured his shoulder. It was Isaac Guerendo who stepped up and played 43 snaps, while Patrick Taylor, the number 3 running back in that offense, only played 5. Now, we did see a similar situation when Jordan Mason originally injured that shoulder back in week 6. However, in that game, Isaac Guerendo and Patrick Taylor, their snap splits were pretty much even. It's about a 50-50 split between Guerendo and Taylor. That didn't happen in week 8. It was the full Guerendo show. So if McCaffrey doesn't come back in week 10, and if Jordan Mason isn't able to go in week 10, it is full wheels up for Isaac Guerendo in week 10 off the bye. So keep an eye on that. Commanders, we talked a little bit about Brian Robinson, how he's been battling injuries over the last several weeks. He was out snapped last week 56.8% to 47.3% by Austin Ekeler. Now, this is a trend because Austin Ekeler has actually outsnapped Brian Robinson in every game that they've played together since week 3. That is after Brian Robinson led the team in snaps in each of the first 3 games. That's when he suffered the injury. Ever since then, it's been Ekeler outsnapping Brian Robinson every week. Now, another trend I want to talk about is a guy that I've been talking about for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. We're just sitting back and waiting. We're waiting. It's going to happen eventually. The big boom is coming. I promise you the big boom is coming for Rome Odunze. He has had a 25% target share last week, and it was his 3rd time above 20% in the last 5 games. 3 of his last 5 games, he's had a target share above 20%. I talked about him on the Off the Bench Sleepers show last week as one of my favorite sleepers. It didn't quite happen, obviously. However, he did lead the Bears in receiving yards against the Commanders. So I'm going to take that as a mini win. I'll take it. And the last trend you need to know heading into week 9 is Mike Gesicki's target shares in games without T. Higgins. 3 games we have seen this year without T. Higgins. Mike Gesicki has had a 14% target share, 25% target share, and a 22% target share. Now, in the games when Higgins is on the field, that goes down to 13%, 3%, 5%, and 4%. And the production matches it. Mike Gesicki has had 2 really productive games in the 3 games that T. Higgins has been out. So Mike Gesicki, I think we saw a question earlier in the show, in the chat, about Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki is usable. He might be a tight end 1 this week. He might be a borderline tight end 1 this week. I might start him over Jake Ferguson. Might just start him over Jake Ferguson. Things looking really nice for Mike Gesicki, assuming T. Higgins is out. All right, before we get to questions, I do like to end this show with an underdog play. We always give you an underdog play. I think last week was the first time we've missed since week 2. The play last week, if you remember, it was we were going higher than 0.05 touchdowns for Kenneth Walker, essentially just predicting that Kenneth Walker was going to score a touchdown. That didn't happen. It was like the second time this year he didn't score a touchdown because, of course. But up until that point, we've been really hot with it. So this week, my underdog plan, if you haven't played on Underdog, if you haven't signed up on Underdog, I really, really encourage you to do so. Not only can you play these pick'ems, but you can also draft. You can still draft teams. You can still draft teams right here, right now, in week 9, during the season. You can do it. And they've got NBA, they've got everything, every sport imaginable. You can do pick'ems and drafts and everything you could ever want from a fantasy app. So find Underdog, use promo code YARDSPER when you sign up. They're going to give you a free pick'em as well as a nice deposit bonus offer of up to $1,000. That is promo code YARDSPER on Underdog. And this week we are taking Devon Achane higher than 50.5 rushing yards against the Bills. And this is why. In his career, Devon Achane has played against the Bills 3 times. Every single time he has hit 50 rushing yards or more. That includes this season back in week 2 with Tua Tagovailoa at quarterback. Devon Achane carried the ball 22 times for 96 yards against the Bills. We've seen the Bills give up some big rushing performances this year already. Derrick Henry's 199-yard game came against the Bills. Came against the Bills. They are susceptible to the run. And Devon Achane is a major, major, major part of that offense right now, especially as they want to try to protect Tua Tagovailoa. So I expect easily Devon Achane will clear 50.5 rushing yards this week against the Bills. And make sure you use that promo code when you sign up for Underdog. That'll get you that free pick on top of this pick, which is essentially free, because I think it's going to smash, plus your deposit offer of up to $1,000. Promo code YARDSPER on Underdog. Let's get a couple questions before we end this show. All right. Let's scroll up to the top real quick, and then we'll get out of here. We already talked about this unfortunate timing of this trade. Do we think Khalil Herbert gets traded to the Cowboys? Man, we've been talking about this since July as a possibility. Why haven't they done it? The Bears clearly want nothing to do with Khalil Herbert. The Cowboys clearly desperately need a running back, especially now that they're not even allowing Ezekiel Elliott to come to the game for some type of disciplinary action. They need a running back. They're gonna roll out Dalvin Cook. Get Khalil Herbert. This guy he's no superstar. But he's clearly better than anything that they're rolling out in Dallas right now. They are desperate. And it's not going to cost you anything to get him. You can probably get him for a 7th round pick in 2026. You could probably get Khalil Herbert in a 6th. I'm sorry. Yeah, you could probably get Khalil Herbert plus for a 6th or 7th round pick in 2026. Not even 2025. But the question is, do I think they will? No, I don't. Unfortunately, I don't think they'll do it. It's just too obvious. They don't do that. They're not going to do it. This one's from Chucks. Chucks is a big, see him in a lot of our chats, which is great to see. PPR league, need 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and a flex. The running backs are Jacobs, Chase Brown, Ramondre, and Dowdle. Wide receivers are Lamb. Obviously, we're playing him. Marvin Harrison Jr., Ladd McConkey, DeAndre Hopkins, and JSN. So we're going to go with 2 running backs, and that is going to be Josh Jacobs, and I think we can go Ramondre this week. Although I do like Chase Brown against the Raiders as well. Maybe he can be our flex. But let's go Jacobs and Ramondre. Let's go for the wide receivers. We need 2, obviously Lamb. I think we go Marvin Harrison Jr. So we need a flex. In the flex, I think we go with Chase Brown against the Raiders. All right. Last question that I see in the chat. What's up, bro? Am I crazy for thinking about starting Bo Nix over Jordan Love? I don't think that's crazy. I don't think it's crazy. Not at all. The Ravens have given up so many fantasy points to quarterbacks this year. And Bo Nix is scoring a ton of fantasy points. He's a top 10 quarterback in fantasy points per game right now. Now, what worries me is that the Ravens defense, why they're giving up so many fantasy points, is because they're giving them a ton of passing yards. That's not really where Bo Nix is getting there with his fantasy points. He's getting there with rushing. And I believe, I may be wrong about this, but I believe the Ravens have held both Jaden Daniels and Josh Allen below 25 rushing yards in the games that they played against them this year. So that would be my concern. It does feel like a really nice spot for Bo Nix, but that could be, for that reason, could be a trap situation for Bo Nix. But I don't think you're crazy at all for that. And then should we go Cedric Tillman over Jaden Reed, full PPR? I can't do that. No, I'm gonna roll with Jaden Reed. I know Reed is volatile, but if we look at Cedric Tillman over the last 2 weeks, he's gotten there on volume. The Browns threw the ball a ton last week, right? They threw the ball a ton. This game environment is going to be a completely different game environment. Last week, they had a shootout with the Ravens, who we just talked about, very susceptible to the pass. This week, they're going against a much better Chargers defense in a game that is probably going to be pretty low scoring. I would bet that both of these teams, the Chargers and the Browns, will both be under 20 fantasy points, under 20 points in this game. They're both going to score less than 20 points, which means it could be a lot of rushing, not a lot of passes, not a lot of plays, not a lot of touchdowns. I don't expect Cedric Tillman to give you the same production this week as he's given you the last 2 weeks. And I just love myself some Jaden Reed. He is just too damn good to bench. He's a volatile player, but embrace the volatility and go with Jaden Reed. All right. So I got to get out of here because I got another show starting in 43 minutes right here on the Yards for Fantasy YouTube channel. If I didn't get to your questions or you have other questions, you can find my rankings at yardsforfantasy.com for the week. We also have a start sit tool and a trade calculator as well. And I'll be back here at 12:20 tomorrow Eastern time, answering your start sit questions all the way up to kickoff. But again, don't miss the Sleepers episode tonight, coming here in 42 minutes right here on the Yards for Fantasy YouTube channel. We've got some deep cuts this week, as well as a crazy bold prediction. We always end those shows with bold predictions. My bold prediction last week was this close. I mean, this close to happening. This close. I got an even bolder one this week. I've got a prediction that a player is going to do something that no player in the NFL has done since 2022, and only 4 players in NFL history have ever done. I'm predicting that someone's going to do it this week. Stay tuned for that show. 40 minutes from right now, right here on the Yards for Fantasy YouTube channel. I will see you there.